Welcome. Today I'm going to be talking a bit about how our attention can be used as a sort of vehicle for guiding ourselves through various alchemical processes of transformation. And alchemy is a esoteric practice which can be on a surface level understood as the sort of the chemical and material transmutation of base metals towards gold. This kind of purification and perfection of a substance. But it can also be understood in psychological terms in relation to how we can purify our minds and transform them towards much better, much more enlightened kind of states of being. And I'm going to be talking a bit about how our attention, which is a sort of a central focalizing and concentrating tool of our consciousness or aspect of our consciousness. I'm going to be talking about how that is used as a integral aspect of the dynamics of transformation. It's particular movements, particular concentrations and uses of our attention which really takes us through the different stages of alchemical transformation towards the final end goal, which is ultimately enlightenment and kind of a mastery of certain spiritual faculties. So really, our attention is a kind of an active, ambiguating force of our awareness. It sort of dictates and directs our engagement with the world. It selectively emphasizes and selectively ignores stuff, and it very much lies at the root of many of our psychological maladies. Our, depression, for example, is a disposition of our attention to hyper-focus upon negative aspects, negative ruminations regarding ourselves, the future, the world. It's kind of this state of mind where our attention and our reality becomes caught up within these forces, and it becomes difficult to really liberate oneself from it. And it's conversely, when we think about everything that we learn, is a consequence of many different many accumulated uses of our attention. When we're learning musical instruments, you have to attend to the instrument. Learning guitar, you're moving your fingers in a particular way. You're trying to attend to the rhythm, to the sound, the kind of feel of an instrument, and that sort of utilizes very many different aspects of our attention. Our sound, our attending to particular sounds, our attending to our body, our fingers, for example. And if you're not paying sufficient attention to it, if you're sort of idly doing something, idly trying to learn something passively, which many people do when they're, say, listening to something whilst doing other stuff, your attention is sort of really fragmented between stuff, and you're not really putting yourself in that sort of psychological state for learning. So really, in order to learn, you need a deep concentration, a deep application of your attentional energies. And so really, in this context, attention, the right use of attention is the catalyst for transforming yourself. It's a catalyst for highlighting to yourself what you wish to focus on, to understand, to dive deeper into, and therefore to change. You can only change stuff through first paying attention to it. So yeah, I've written stuff down to kind of ensure that I don't go fractaling into all sorts of different tangents. But so yeah, sovereignty over our attention is the deepest form of alchemy. I think it's a reclaiming of our focus amidst a very distracted world, a world that seeks to want to parasitize your attention, to sell you products and services, and to convince you of certain ideas and ideologies. We unconsciously are swayed by these sorts of things when we're not aware, when we're not really tethered to, well, what we are paying attention to right now. When we get distracted from a particular task, it's a very unconscious process. We just find ourselves mindlessly strolling. A notification ding sort of grips our mind, without us really having much say over the matter. And then next thing you know, 10, 15 minutes have been spent scrolling, and you're in this kind of weird dissociated fugue state. And in these sorts of states, you've lost your sovereignty over your mind. Your mind has been captured by an external factor, and you're losing that inner willpower, that inner sovereignty over how you are engaging with the world. So to sort of come back to the nature of alchemy, which, as I said, is the transmutation of base substances to a more purified, a higher, more spiritually ascended substance. Putting it in the sort of psychological terms rather than the sort of the exoteric meaning of transforming metals to gold. Transforming your baser or lower parts of your psyche towards a higher aspect of the psyche is a kind of movement away from desires, fears, and ignorance. It's a movement away from these aspects of, the psyche, the lower aspects of the psyche, which keep us sort of tethered to sort of lower vibrational states. And there are different names for these alchemical phases. You have and I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but you have the Nigredo or Blackening stage, which is the first stage of sort of breaking down, deconstructing your old self, deconstructing all the lower patterns of your psyche, and and you do this through a form of deep introspection and shadow work, which is really an orientation of your attention towards all the old ingrained patterns that are keeping you trapped, that are keeping you stifled. And this is the first stage. In order to change these sorts of things, to liberate yourself from them, you have to first bring it to your awareness. And like I said, this is an act of introspection, an act of shadow work, of making the repressed aspects of the psyche, which are often lingering in the unconscious, you need to first make them conscious. And then the next stage we call the Albedo stage, or the whitening stage of the alchemical process. And this is really a purification and a striving towards greater clarity regarding these sorts of patterns, in order to pursue sort of deeper insight and deeper wisdom. And this is this sort of the continuation of that sort of the blackening phase of first bringing to awareness the rigid patterns of your old self that you want to change. You first have to bring it to your awareness, and then you have to work through it. You first have to understand the nature of these patterns, understand, what are the unresolved traumas underpinning it. How can you sort of release those sort of tension points? And they very much feel like psychical and psychological kind of knots within your mind. It's a kind of knot within our mind that keeps us trapped in addiction. For example, will addiction often comes as an attempt to kind of to self-medicate, to kind of release your sort of inner dissatisfaction with a kind of addiction object, and your psyche becomes almost trapped within this kind of this knot, this cycle, where you feel bad and then you seek that sort of coping strategy, and it sort of reinforces this pattern, which doesn't really resolve the source of the dissatisfaction. It just seeks towards short-term releases, but it doesn't actually release the fundamental pattern. It doesn't purify it. But beyond this sort of this whitening albedo stage, we have the Citrinitas, if I pronounce it right, which is the yellowing phase of the alchemical process of transforming a base metal to gold. And this is sort of, you can think of this as a continuation of this purification phase, where as you continue to purify your lower aspects of the self, as you begin to sort of attain deeper understanding of them, and through that understanding you become almost liberated from them. Your lower urges, your desires, they don't have the same pull. They don't trap you as much. You know, this is a further stage really of purification, and as well a kind of deeper illumination. As you're able to sort of work through these old patterns of the self and to break beyond that, you can then sort of see deeper into reality, and you can sort of see deeper without the sort of the blemishment, without the filtering of your egocentric desires, your egocentric limits. To really to see deeper into reality and to attain a more illuminated state. It only comes through that purification and deconstruction of those old parts of yourself. And you have to break the old in order to pursue the new. And you will find yourself coming into deeper contact with deeper sort of spiritual wisdoms within yourself. You'll come into contact perhaps with a deeper silence of your soul, which sort of whispers to you through deep intuition, I suppose. Your mind is less frantic, there's less noisy natterings, there's less dissatisfied strivings, really. And instead, you sort of you find more of a center to your being, a center to yourself that is deeply silent and equanimous, if I pronounce it right, or there's a deep equanimity really within that state, because it is, of course, the egoic mind that makes us feel dissatisfied, that makes us feel like we need to be striving and seeking external things to feel a kind of an internal lack. And this striving force, this motivational force, it's very pronounced within our sort of culture, where we are sort of conditioned into reifying our egos, through reifying our individuality. And we have all sorts of marketing advertisement agencies who are predicated upon creating desires, creating dissatisfaction within us, so that we will buy whatever thing they are selling us. There's a whole economy set up here to keep you trapped within that sense. But as you cultivate deeper awareness, deeper insight, deeper sovereignty over your attention, you'll be able to cultivate that ability of discernment to see quite clearly the sort of conditioning that exists within our society, and that really frees you from the external, from the whims of the external, because you are becoming more in contact with your internal sense of discernment, of judgment and truth, pretty much. And this leads us to the final stage of the alchemical process, which is called the sort of the Rubedo, the reddening stage, which is the final stage really, where the alchemist sort of achieves a sense of union with the divine. They sort of pierce beyond that veil of separation, which isn't really there, and they see quite clearly how they are continuous with everything. That the ego is just a pattern, really. It's a certain, how do I describe it? Like there's aspects of the ego in terms of it's a pattern of mind, a disposition of mind which we perhaps have evolved to have, so that we know to bring food to our mouth, to know that, to know how to survive in this sort of this community of different individuals and souls. But of course, the membrane that separates you between your organism, between you and the world, that membrane isn't discrete. It's not a hard and fast boundary. It's a leaky one. It's a porous one. There's a constant exchange between that, and that's perhaps one way of sort of conceiving how you are not separate to reality. You are a flowing and always exchanging membrane between you and reality, between the internal and external. And, the collapsing of the internal and external into something that is unified is, that's the essence of non-dual philosophy, of understanding that reality is not two, it's not separated into two. Rather, those are just sort of two ways of mentally conceptualizing a reality that is interconnected, And this final stage is a kind of, it's a total unity. It's a total dissolving of egocentric separation, where the ego is not the master anymore; it's rather a servant to the highest aspect of yourself, And I'm going to talk a bit more about how our attention, there's different movements and dynamics of attention through these sort of different stages of alchemical transformation. And in the Nigredo stage, the blackening stage that I first described, our attention is very much being brought to the self, to bring the shadow aspects of ourselves to our awareness. Like I said, these are the parts of ourselves that we avoid and repress, that we push away because it doesn't cohere with our socialized senses of, of normal conduct. It doesn't cohere with who we think ourselves to be, in terms of our egocentric models and stuff. And these are things that very often do lie hidden within our unconscious. They are the sorts of fears, the limiting beliefs, the unresolved traumas that that fester within us, and they sort of in an unconscious way skew our behavior in certain aspects. And we'll say certain things, and sort of with a lack of awareness of why we're saying it. We might think that we're not capable of doing something because we hold a sort of an unconscious limiting belief that we're not capable of doing that sort of thing. But when we are able to sort of bring our attention to these sorts of things, we can better understand the root of them, whether it's in certain childhood experiences, certain experiences we've had through our lives, which has sort of convinced us of this certain thing. When we understand the root of a pattern, we can then begin to release it, to understand that actually this limiting belief is, say, ungrounded. It's not a true belief. It's something that is really just preventing me from really actualizing. And as you release that, you purify yourself of those sort of lower aspects of the self. And shadow work as well, it's very much a process of dissolving our ego-driven impulses that we're often conditioned into enacting. These are the sort of the pursuits of power, of money, material, worldly things. They're things that keep you trapped on this treadmill of pursuing more and more, but doesn't lead to a real deep sense of internal satisfaction. We know this from when you look at the lives of the highest performers within our materialistically driven society. They're often not psychically whole individuals. Their desire to accumulate such a strong, collection of shiny objects and material goods, it's often driven by a sense of lack. It's a sense of dissatisfaction within the self. So they constantly want more and more, but they will see that there's nothing external outside of you that will fill a void within yourself. To sort of to fill your internal voids, you have to look inwards, really, and that's a movement of your attention inside to understanding the old self, the old patterns that you harbor. And in order to go through these alchemical process of transforming yourself, you do need to first represent those old patterns and then break them down by understanding them, by looking into them, understanding the nature, the roots of them, and then releasing them. And this continues to the next stage, which is the Albedo, or the whitening stage of the alchemical process, where you're using your attention as an agent of purification, as an agent of clarifying in deeper detail these patterns of your old self. And you'll do this by sort of observing your thoughts, observing your emotions, your behaviors, and trying to really get to the nitty-gritty of them. And you need to do this in order to shed yourself of these sorts of impurities, which sort of stifle and bias your perception of the world. And it is these impurities that make you attend to a world with a kind of agenda. And when you attend to the world with an agenda, say, of certain egocentric desires or whatever, you're not seeing reality as it is. You're seeing reality in terms of how it relates to your ego. So very much sort of working through these sort of impurities of the ego will enable you to therefore see reality in a much more unblemished fashion. And then you are seeing deeper into reality. You're coming into deeper contact with truth by that process, through that process. So to summarize this stage, it's a process of purifying the mind of the old patterns so that you can then come into deeper contact with reality. And of course, the sorts of methodologies here are the cultivation of meditation. It's the cultivation of reflection and contemplation. And that's something that we should all be doing if we're wanting to come into deeper awareness and deeper contact with ourselves and reality. And, going on to the next stage where, attention beyond purification, it becomes an agent of awakening when, the removal of these impurities are achieved, and we are able to thereby see more clearly and unblemished by our ego. And this is the nature of enlightenment or illumination. It's a stage where sustained attention is being dedicated not to lower principles of the soul, but to higher principles, to deeper truths and insights. Your attention is being liberated from these lower patterns, and is then therefore able to orient towards higher and more spiritually satisfying patterns. And you'll find that in this sort of stage, your awareness is sort of focused as this sort of it's one pointed laser that sort of really sharpens your mind, and it's deeply clarified. It's not scattered, it's not fragmented, it's not being swayed by all these sorts of old patterns. You're more aware of what it is you need to be doing right now in this very moment. And this is really a stage where the link between your deeper internal motivations, your deeper truths, it is able to really conjoin with your action in a much more synergistic kind of way. When we're trapped within old patterns, there's a kind of dissonance there where our actions, the things that we're doing, the things that we're attending to, it's not in concordance with the deeper appetites of ourselves, and that manifests as a kind of dissatisfaction. It manifests as a niggling sense of I'm not in alignment. So really, as you sort of go through these sorts of stages of my microphone seems to have disconnected briefly, but you're going through deeper stages of awakening, of deeper hopefully this works. My microphones have run out of charge. I've been yapping so long, but this whole process is a process of aligning with deeper truths more, and aligning with yourself, your self-evident sense of knowing. And if we come to the sort of the final stage of the Rubedo or the Reddening stage, where you are really amplifying those sorts of that spiritual knowing, your attention is then becoming fully integrated with your deeper intentions and your deeper purposes. And this is really the final stage of transformation, where you are achieving a deeper mastery and a deeper awakening. And the metaphorical gold, the alchemical gold, is really created in this stage, where your attention is no longer a kind of a tool, but rather just a center, a way of being. And we are living with a kind of a full presence, a full purpose, and a full alignment with our higher self. So to summarize, transformation, alchemical transformation, it involves a dissolution, a breaking of the old, where our attention is being used to confront our old and limiting patterns. And then through that, there is a purification stage where you are clarifying and refining these patterns. You're moving your attention inwards to gain greater clarity and purification of these certain thoughts and emotions that often hold us back. And then through this period of purification, you then move towards greater illumination, where you are awakening to sort of deeper truths. You're applying your attention in a much more focused manner in order to gain wisdom and a broader perspective upon your life's purposes. And then through that illumination, you then have a deeper integration where you master and you unify, and you are living then with a kind of a full presence, and your attention is really harmonized with action, which then leads to a far more enlightened state of being. So really, like, alchemy, esoteric alchemy, it's not about changing external substances. It's not about transforming base metals to gold. It's about internal alignment. It's about bringing the mind, spirit, and the body into a sense of harmony. And your attention is really the vehicle for aligning these different layers. And we align our mind by cultivating mental clarity and by cultivating focus. And we align the spirit by using attention to connect with deeper truths and deeper spiritual insights. And as well, we align the body by becoming aware of how our physical actions and our habits influence our well-being. And attention is really the vehicle by which the raw material of our daily lives is transformed towards greater personal growth, towards greater enlightenment. And to offer some lasting kind of thoughts on this, this is entirely a journey of change and transformation. And it's it points to how our attention, when it is directed with purpose, our attention is really the vehicle by which we undergo these alchemical processes. And it's how we turn our base materials of our mind, our lower aspects of the mind, into something much more meaningful, much more powerful and higher. And what we focus upon, we transform. And through that transformation, we then ourselves become transformed. That is the journey, and we should all be humble within this sort of journey of accepting our negative patterns, accepting the flaws, the imperfections, but we should be moving towards a state of deeper purification of those patterns, a deeper integration of them into ourselves, so that we can then, achieve that, that metaphorical gold, that gold, that bliss of the mind. It is very much an attainable thing. But yeah, I hope that's been interesting. I yapped on for a bit longer than I anticipated, but it is what it is. That's just what happens sometimes. But if it's been interesting, I like and subscribe, all that sort of stuff. If you want to hear me yap about other stuff, but have a good day. Thumbs up.